My name is Zachary Michael Jack, and I'm originally from Mechanicsville, Iowa, from Cedar County, and I'm in Iowa City tonight to do a reading from Native Soulmate, a new book of creative nonfiction that just came out a few months ago. Yeah, I think probably the question I get most from readers is maybe what are you working on now, or what are you doing next? And I never quite know how to answer that because I'm never quite sure what my next project is going to be until I'm actually doing it. And people think I'm morbid when I say this, but I always say, well, that sort of depends if I am here 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, or 6 years from now. You never know, right? I mean, I think life is too unpredictable to be thinking about what you're going to be doing 4 years from now and 8 years from now. I think everything that you do is sort of a little miracle, and you just ought to take it, be glad for it, and hope that you get to do the next thing. Yeah, I've never been good at multitasking of any kind, and never been able to study in school with music on, or I know some writers draw inspiration from having their favorite tunes on in the background or some sort of ambient music, but no, I've never been able to do that. I just think that I grew up with a lot of quiet around me. I mean, I had cousins running all around, and there was always noise on the farm, but there's a lot of quiet spaces too on the farm, and somehow I got attuned to that and accustomed to that, and kind of depend on it now. I mean, I guess when I think back to the people that I read when I was younger, they would be people like W.B. Yeats, the great Irish poet and playwright, politician. Someone like Eugene O'Neill, the playwright, I really liked a lot, although he's incredibly depressing. Maybe I was at that stage, when I was 16, 17, 18, where that's the kind of angst that I needed and wanted, but I just felt that it was very visceral, very elegant, and true and brave stuff. So in high school I was primarily reading playwrights. I like Thornton Wilder a lot, of Our Town and By the Skin of Our Teeth fame. Yeah, I would say those would be my touchstones from high school anyhow. Probably nature and space. Not to say outer space, but having space around me. Nature for sure, hiking is a big one, kayaking, canoeing, something outdoors. Sports, playing sports more than watching them. Watching them gets me all riled up. And of course, growing up with the Cubs and the Hawkeyes, I mean, nothing can be more of a powerless feeling than watching them tug at your heartstrings. So yeah, those would be my ways of rejuvenating. I guess travel, as well. Although the older I get, the less I seem to relish traveling. I think that's pretty common. When I write fiction, I notice that a lot of times in dialogue, which I'm not especially accomplished at, I don't think there'll be some sort of well or something at the beginning that I always end up cutting out. I think there's a lot of little asides that I would include in prose that I end up having to cut out. But in general, I mean, I'm the kind of writer I think that I have to cut a lot because I don't think I'm a good first draft writer. And I think I always write too much. And as many people could attest, I'm sure everybody who's ever edited my work would attest that, I'm sure. And yeah, I think it's healthy for me to cut out about at least a quarter of everything that I write. Boy, that's a good one. There's a lot of things that I haven't done yet that I would like to do in terms of things to try. I would like to write more fiction and hopefully will. I've written, I started very early on writing primarily poetry, and then moved into a phase where I was primarily doing nonfiction of various kinds, whether it's textbooks or literary journalism or creative nonfiction, and have been doing fiction more recently, but I feel like there's other stories too that I'd like to tell that I haven't really had a chance to sit down and explore. And like everybody, I always say one day I will tell this story, or I'll try to tell this story, but every year that goes by, I'm a harder judge of those ideas, and I talk myself out of a lot of them. And I think that I do that more as time goes by, and I think you become a little bit more of a tough editor, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. Yeah, I mean, my first hunch would be to say definitely. I mean, in a way, it's either making a world or remaking a world. It's what T.S. Eliot has that quote in The Wasteland about, I'll get it wrong, but shoring up your fragments is a way that he sort of puts the act of poetry and writing. Yeah, I think it's meditative for sure. I think can be restorative. I think it can also be very damning. You know, I think it can be lead you down paths that you don't want to go on. And so I think, you know, like the spirituality or the spirit world, there are an infinite number of paths, and you know, a lot of theology is built on polarities, and I think writing tends to have that it can take you to a brightness or a lightness, or it can take you to a darkness, and sometimes you don't know which it's taking you to, and that's the mystery of it, and that's the promise of it, but that's the danger of it too. And I do think that writing is sort of I've come to understand it as a sort of a dangerous thing, in that it has the capacity to take you either direction. And I think the same thing is true of, I think that theology is based on, and the spiritual life and religion is in some ways based on a challenge to one's self, a challenge to one's beliefs, and kind of a tempering of your trying of your mettle, you know, by trial. And I think that writing is that way. You know, I think again, as every year it's broadened to me. I see almost everyone as a writer, just like I see almost everyone as a musician. And that's often the way, if I'm teaching writing, the way I present it, that the ability to write is a very common thing because it's a very innate thing. And, you know, in Iowa City, for example, if you asked how many people play an instrument or play guitar or sing a little bit, I would bet you over half of this town does. And I think that writing is like music. It's sort of a muscle, and a lot of people have the gift to do it. It just becomes a question of motivation and time and circumstance and what part of your life you're in. I think in the era of online profiles and Facebook and all the self-editing and self-representing that we do, that more and more everyone is a writer, and that we're all, I think, in some ways, because of the artifactual culture that we're in with YouTube and the internet and the kind of relentless documentation, that we've become, that society itself is moving in the direction of being more self-representational and more self-editing and conscious of message, and all those things, and close observation, all those things make for, and sometimes critique, make for a writer. And so I think that the explosion of books that are being published every year, and it's in the millions, is good evidence that we're entering an era when I think writing is actually prospering as maybe never before, although it's paradoxically harder and harder to find an audience and sell books.